Hello everyone, and welcome to week 4 of the course, where we will be discussing the work of Professor Sarah Hennessy and visualizing classroom dialogue through dialogic moves. In this session, we're going to focus first on the ways in which the dialogue has been categorized, as well as which categories have evidenced impact for student learning outcomes. And secondly, we're going to talk about supporting classroom dialogue through using talking points. So I'll now pass it over to Farah, who will introduce dialogic moves.
Thanks, Megan. Dialogic moves are descriptors that allow educators to see and evaluate the quality of their classroom dialogue. These categories are also used by educational researchers to understand what type of dialogic practices and moves support children's learning. Sarah Hennessy's work has developed an understanding of how dialogic moves operate and how we can identify them in the classroom. Here's a sample of the categories of dialogue so that you can begin to identify dialogic moves that are taking place in your own setting. So the first one we'll look at is inviting others to build on ideas. So in this one, you may invite others to elaborate, build on, clarify, comment on, or improve their own or somebody else's contribution. So you might hear questions like what, or can you tell me, or can you tell me more about, or can you rephrase this, or do you think, do you agree? And building on ideas is where somebody is either responding to an invitation or just simply doing that naturally in relation to their own previous contribution or somebody else's contribution. So they will be elaborating or clarifying or commenting on something that has already been said. So you might hear it also, or that makes me think, or I mean, or I think she meant. So that's the move, those are the two kind of moves that are related around building on or taking something forward. Now we're going to look at a move that's sometimes called challenge or can be called querying. And this is where you're questioning or disagreeing with or challenging an idea. So what you might hear is, I disagree, or you might hear but, or however, or are you sure? And this would then be something where that's going to lead to further responses, or it's going to lead to taking the dialogue in a different direction. And then finally, the next move that we're going to look at for today is inviting reasoning. So this is where you might invite others to explain what they mean and the reasons behind it, to justify what they're saying, or to use possibility thinking relating to something that has already been said, that they may have said, or somebody else may have said. And in this, you're more likely to hear questions such as why, how, do you think, or can you explain further? Now, I want to reiterate that these phrases that we've given you to help you identify these dialogic moves don't necessarily mean that if somebody uses those phrases, that dialogic move is happening. A dialogic move has a particular description attached to it, and we would need to try and very carefully identify if what is being said matches that description. So there's a range of additional categories to this which we haven't gone through today, and a more comprehensive version of this table is included in the TSEDA pack, a section of which is the core reading for this week. The TSEDA pack will be the basis of Course 2 in this series of MOOCs. But for the purposes of this course, Course 1, we're only asking you to look at sections B and C of the pack, and these sections will help us to visualize dialogue in our classrooms.
Thanks, Farah. So now that you have insight into the different categories of educational dialogue or dialogic moves, do you recognize any of those as taking place in your own setting? And which ones do you think maybe don't happen as frequently, and why might that be? And which do you think are the most impactful for student learning? You can pause the video now and write down some notes for yourself in this week's Reflective Learning Journal if you'd like. Recently, a team at the University of Cambridge produced evidence about the impact of teacher-student dialogue, and they asked which dialogic moves are strongly associated with learning gains. They found the following dialogic moves particularly powerful: building on ideas, invitations to build on ideas, and challenging and questioning others' views respectfully. And the key word here really is respectfully, because too much challenging without the other supportive elements can have a real negative effect. And this is because dialogue can only happen in the context of a supportive classroom. And a supportive classroom also means one in which students are participating actively and there are explicit ground rules for talk. So what we talked about in week 3. And when we refer to students participating actively, this would mean that students, multiple students, give extended contributions and really engage with each other's ideas. I'll now pass it back to Farah, who will introduce part 2 of today's session.
Now that you're more familiar with the categories of dialogue and types of talk that support students' thinking and understanding, let's discuss a strategy to stimulate dialogue. Talking points are used as a tool for stimulating dialogue and opening up a space for dialogue, and they can be used in small groups or as a whole class discussion. So once you've created a dialogic ethos using the ground rules, as we discussed in last week's session, you can use talking points to generate a high level of student participation. When this is combined with the dialogic moves of elaboration or building on, and querying or challenging, this allows students' thinking and understanding to develop. So what exactly are talking points? Talking points are statements that can be open-ended and provocative. They're used to understand students' comprehension about a topic at times, or simply to stimulate further dialogue to enhance learning. They should allow multiple ideas and views to come forward and should encourage students to challenge each other directly. So here are a few examples. Some people, like footballers, get paid too much. Things that give out light, like the sun, are always hot. Dark is a form of energy that is weaker than light. Throwing rubbish into a pit is a good way of getting rid of it. Recycling means that you don't cause any damage to the environment. As you can imagine, these talking points can result in a pretty great discussion, but to get the most out of them, there needs to be that dialogic ethos and trust in place first. In addition to the talking points, educators can also support students' responses through sentence starters. These can include things such as, I agree because, I disagree because, I partially agree because, and so on. Such responses can help bring out building on and elaboration, and querying or challenging, both of which are dialogic moves that accompany the use of talking points.
Thanks, Farah. As an additional tip, you can always start with talking points being used in smaller group settings or activities, as learners will likely have a bit more confidence and willingness to share their views. You can then move on to using them in whole class discussions. In small groups of learners, you can actually also assign a chair for the group who can manage the discussion and encourage all of the other participants to contribute. And it's always really interesting as well to have the learners reflect on that process. So you're going to be asked this week to try out talking points in your own settings and really take the time to reflect on this and how you used them and what happened, what were the outcomes. And we'll really look forward to hearing how that goes. So do share those outcomes on the discussion forum. And that's really it from us for this week's session. We hope that you enjoyed the content. And we're really looking forward to hearing from you on the discussion forum regarding your recognition of the types of talk and dialogic moves already taking place in your settings, as well as your feedback on using talking points to stimulate dialogue. After viewing this video, please do scroll down, watch the interview with Sarah Hennessy below. You can access the readings and the resources for the week, complete the 2 different sets of activities, and of course, please do contribute to the discussion forum. And we'll look forward to seeing you in week 5.